Hello Nippies, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, I'm Nips, a freelance artist, and today you read right, you read the title right. Today we're going to be doing the Jacko challenge, which if you don't know what that is, it is something that has been taking the internet by storm the last couple days. It's basically artists trying to recreate the infamous Jacko pose from Guilty Gear. She's from Guilty Gear, right? Yeah. And I decided to take this up because it just looks so fun. The style is right up my alley. To be quite honest, I kind of want to attempt it again because this one, it's not that I hate it, but I definitely I want to try it in a different kind of way. So for this one, I am using my character Pim from my comic OFFCELL, which is 18 plus if you want to read it. It's free to read. All the links are down below. And Pim is very much a confident himbo. And I thought it would be fun to give him, you know, he sometimes wears like short shorts, crop tops, skirts, dresses, you name it. And I thought he would be perfect for this. And one of the things that you'll see as you watch this speed paint is the exaggeration of the pose. So if you've seen the pose, which at some point I'll throw up on screen so you guys can obviously have it as reference to what the challenge actually is trying to imitate, it's already spine breaking. However, because of the art style, it's not super jarring. So yeah, you can tell that her spine's kind of broken, the anatomy is exaggerated, so you're already dealing with some sort of like unrealistic factors, but it looks so good. And so I kind of wanted to really try like something super exaggerated, but also somewhat realistic. And I don't know that I pulled that off. I think that I wanted to push it a little too far. And sometimes you kind of have to push your limits to see, you know, to learn something and to kind of, you know, just try new things. So you'll see here that I had different iterations of the pose where I kind of just had slightly more normal angle. And then I went with this like very, very extreme kind of like 1 point, 2 point perspective where it's just the angles are just all over the place, where I even had the butt like angled down. And I decided to just put it back up to a normal position because, oh man, that was gonna go a whole different way. Another one of the things that I probably could have done to make this look slightly more normal is instead of arching the back so much to the inside or too much to the inside, I could have brought the body a little bit more forward instead of bringing it down in a complete, just like straight line down, and make it more slanted so it looks a little bit more realistic, especially at this angle. Not that this is impossible, like you definitely see gymnasts do this type of thing and contortionists and stuff, but I think for the way that I've drawn it and the angles and the curves and everything that I've done, it looks a little jarring, especially with like the back. So you'll see that like the leg muscles and everything, not that everything is super accurate, but I definitely tried to go for a more like, I tried to add some more realistic muscles. But in the back, I definitely had to like make up some muscles here and there and kind of like stretch things out just because like it just wasn't realistic kind of to begin with, even though the pose isn't like entirely impossible. Like there have definitely been real life people doing the challenge as well. And oh my God, what an awesome trend. You'll notice here a lot of my struggling on where I want to exaggerate and where I don't, what kind of angle I'm going with. And I will say, even if the product wasn't the best, I think this was one of those pieces where, first of all, just like good excuse to draw ass, all right? Aren't we all just looking for an excuse to draw ass, all right? But just a good excuse to practice on top of that. So it's quick, it's fun, everyone's just kind of doing their own thing, and it's just a good excuse to practice. And when I saw this one, not only did I want to do it just because, you know, we all like to draw some butt and that it would be fun to do that, but the amount of perspective, anatomy, and shape practice that I really got out of this is just super invaluable. And so I really enjoyed it. You'll see me struggling with a lot of angles during this piece, like the shapes. And I always say it every video, but shapes are not like my strong suit. And that's not a self-deprecating comment. As much as it kind of quote unquote might look like I'm maybe slightly good at shapes, I'm really not. For this piece, you'll notice also that the sides, there's no canvas or anything. So I've been working in Clip Studio and Paint because my comic is drawn entirely on Clip Studio, except the text and, you know, some extra stuff. But in general, like all the base stuff is drawn in Clip Studio. And Clip Studio has a time lapse feature, which is just so broken, so good. And I had never really used it. And this was something that I wasn't planning on making a speed paint out of. So when you save the speed paint on Clip Studio, you'll go to time lapse and then you'll go to record time lapse and it'll just record it with your file. And then later, whenever you're done, you can export it. And when you export it, it'll ask you how long you want it to be. So you can, you know, save it as 60 seconds, you can save it the full thing, you can, you know, save multiple lengths. And so my idea for this was that it was gonna be quick and that I was just gonna save like a 30-second time lapse for this. But in the end, it took me a little bit longer than I really wanted to. I think it ended up taking me like 3 hours or something. And I think it was just, the original sketch was very, very fast. I did it really quick and I was ready to only take like 45 minutes, an hour on it. And lo and behold, I always take it too far. So I ended up switching the angle, making it really dramatic. And then I started struggling, you know, to make it look right. And so that's where it ended up taking like quadruple the amount of time. You'll see here also just me trying to keep it sketchy because sometimes I just like take it way too far. Like I just want to do too much. And this was just supposed to not take that long. I've been working on like more sketchy shape things because the commissions on the side and the comic and stuff really require some practice in that area. And I've been really trying to, you know, improve there. And so you'll see that a lot of the sketches, or at least hopefully it's obvious that a lot of my recent sketches have been trying to focus on more shapes and poses. So here I brought it into Photoshop. So this one does have the screen because Photoshop doesn't have a time lapse feature. So you'll see my canvas and everything. Normally I bring it into Photoshop to color because I just love the Photoshop UI for coloring. The comic gets its flat colors done on Clip Studio, and what I'll do is I'll bring it into Photoshop to finalize text, finalize like the coloring, finishing touches. But in general, depends on what type of colored sketches, but most of the time I do like to add my finishing touches on Photoshop. It's just so good, so good. So here you'll see me add, you know, the base colors. Pim is just, a lot of his base colors are just red, black, white, some yellows sprinkled in most of the time. So I really wanted to make like a simple color scheme. I didn't want to take away too much from the anatomy, and I wanted to use some basic shading to, you know, block out some shapes so that way it feels a little bit more tangible. This part, I will say, I can't tell if I messed up the drawing by adding too much shading. You'll notice that I brought down the opacity of my brush for the shadows so that there would be some shapes, but that I wouldn't take away too much from the lines. So you'll notice that I stopped shading with such a dark such a dark color. And then I start filling in the other areas, trying to pick out some colors. I really didn't want to go too wild with the colors. I really wanted it to be super simple. Keep the colors fun, bright, and mostly flat. I was trying to make this front part dark as well so that your eye doesn't go too much to it. It's just supposed to be kind of in the foreground, and really your eye is supposed to go obviously towards him and face down, ass up, you know? That's where we want the focus. I was even contemplating Gaussian blurring the front, but I feel like for the quality of the coloring, it would have been way too much, because then Gaussian blur, usually if you're gonna include it, not that you can't include it with like flat colors and stuff, it has to be tastefully applied sometimes. And here it was not gonna work. It was just not gonna work. It would have been a little too distracting to the overall like situation of the piece, I guess. I don't know what to call it. But here you'll see me messing around with the colors. Honestly, the design of the shoes, not my favorite. I just kind of like winged it. And it's just, they look kind of basic for how I wanted them to look. I wanted them to look a little bit more dynamic, slightly more shape. They don't really have as much shape in life as I wanted them to. But at this point, I had already kind of wasted a little too much time. I needed to go back to work. And so I really just decided to kind of add some finishing touches here and there, not add too much. You'll notice that like I start adding highlights and then I'm like, girl, like stop please. So I really try to keep it to a minimum. I think one of the hardest parts for me, which you'll probably notice as this piece kind of comes to an end, is actually bringing things to an end. Like, I have such a hard time making things look finished, or just like knowing when to stop. And so even doodles sometimes just are impossible, because I don't know. I'm like, should I add a color here? Should I put this here? Should I put that there? Should I add this border here? Should I add more shading? Like, I just have such a hard time finishing and just knowing what to do. So I have a huge respect for artists that can just make things look finished so effortlessly. Well, they make it look effortless. Sometimes you have a good eye, your experience, and you know, all of that. So for some reason, it's so impossible for me to find good ways to make things look finished. So you'll see here, like, I'm literally just like grasping at straws, trying to like add like a pretty simple background without going too far. Well, that was it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully I think this is allowed, right? Like, there's music videos that are worse than this. So hopefully this is not too bad. I will put the link of the finished product in the description below. It'll be on all my socials at Art by Nips. The comic links and information are down below as well if you want to read it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys thought down below in the comments. Like if you like the video, subscribe, join the Nippy family, the more the merrier. And I will see you guys next video. Bye.